But what we're going to take a look at is, by the way, this is the new sort of theme we're actually having with ParkLogic is be inspired. And you'll see that a lot more at NamesCon. And be inspired is not a get inspired, because I think everyone is inspired, but have a state of being inspired. And it's something we're really excited about. And I'll be talking a lot more about that at NamesCon. But anyway, okay, so let's get started into looking at what's been going on. The key graphs are these ones here, which is the normalized RPM and the RPM charts. And these charts where you have the RPM or revenue per 1,000 visitors, what's actually going on? It's tipped over, that's the trend line. But if you can see at the very end here, you can see it looks like we're starting to come out of summer, which is nice. On the RPM, normalized RPM is normally a little bit slower, so we'll probably see that swinging around shortly as well. So if you're looking at your numbers and think, oh boy, my numbers aren't very good, wherever you monetize your traffic, then just give it a little bit more time and we'll start that wonderful rush towards Christmas. And it's a great experience for those of you who do traffic monetization. Okay, so I thought I'd just zoom in a little bit in this case of what's actually happening in the last, since July 2022 with the normalized RPM, because the previous chart there, it's a bit hard to see what's going on here. So this is here, and you can see they're slowly beginning to trend up. That's the RPM, slowly beginning to trend up, and the normalized RPM is quite bumpy. Just to give you an idea, the last month has been quite chaotic. In fact, yeah, so it's been quite chaotic, and in fact, it's been quite soft in the online advertising space. In fact, if you've seen some of the reports coming out of like Facebook and that sort of stuff, they're saying it's soft. And I think that's been a combination of the previous 2 summers, we didn't have really the typical 10 to 15% downturn you'd expect during the Northern Hemisphere summer, because everyone goes outside and they rather than be on their computers, which I know is a horrible thing. We want everyone to be on their computers. But this year is different. It's a lot softer than normal, what we're seeing. And I think the reason why for that is suddenly everyone's saying, oh, we're free. We can actually do stuff now. COVID, although COVID's still there, it seems to be less of an issue for a lot of people. So everyone is taking off. And you can see that reflected in the chaos of the airports at the moment, particularly in Europe. It's just absolute madness. But anyway, so we've seen it being quite soft, but we're seeing the early shoots of it swinging around. Okay, so what's happened to CTR and EPC? This is, if you look at the red line, is earnings per click. This is from 2020. It raced on up through COVID as the demand for traffic really skyrocketed, and it was quite phenomenal. And then the CTR slowly eroded across time. And that's quite normal. As EPC goes up, CTR will go down. And you can see it's flipping again right here as the click-through rate's gone up. You may say, well, why is that? I think in many respects, it has more to do with Google's treasury department than the traffic quality and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about this, but I've been seeing this for like the last 20 odd years. I've been seeing this sort of dance where they do have an inverse relationship to each other. You can see it a little bit clearer if this is the moving 14-day average for both the CTR and EPC. But let's just move on. Volatility. What was interesting was before the pandemic, it was less volatile. And you can see that when the pandemic hit, it became very volatile. This is comparing the Monday versus the previous Monday, the Tuesday versus the previous Tuesday, and so forth like that. And so it's very volatile. And you notice there the peaks are dropping once again as the pandemic, I think, is reduces. It has its impact being reduced. Okay, so if you had $1 and a domain earning $1 back in the 1st of January 2020, how much would it be earning now? And you can see right there, it would be earning about $1.75 right now. Like I said, we'll see that swing around shortly. We're pretty confident of that. But yeah, so that's almost like a 100% increase in yield compared to this time, the first January 2020. So it's quite an incredible yield if you compare it, say, in some stocks and that sort of stuff. And you see it peaked. There was a great time here.
Marco, you're on mute, mate.
I can't.
Sorry, did I just suddenly disappear on you?
About 10, 15 seconds ago.
Okay, I have no idea why. Zoom did something weird. But anyway, so there we go. Okay. All right, so next thing is, where is the revenue coming from? And this is the revenue split with Google versus direct advertising networks. And you can see that particularly during the pandemic, Google's is in blue. The percentage of traffic won by Google really increased dramatically during the pandemic. At ParkLogic, we actually don't care whether Google wins the traffic or direct advertising wins the traffic. We're quite mercenary. We don't care who gets it as long as it's more than the other guy. That's all we care about. Yeah, so you can see that Google's slowly being eroded right now, and the direct advertising networks are coming up. So the direct advertising networks are around about almost 30% of the revenue is being generated by direct advertising networks. So what does this mean? It means that if you have all your domains with a Google-backed company like a traditional parking, then you're missing out on a great slab of revenue. So if you put all of your domains, for instance, we've got data to prove, you put all your domains with a single parking provider, then the maximum you will win, the absolute best your domains will do is 25% of the time that company will win. Which means 75% of the time that your traffic could be doing better elsewhere. And I've got all the data of that, and it's for the literally the last 15 years on that fact. So this is where ParkLogic, we take traffic inbound, we run a real-time auction, and we route the traffic dynamically to whoever is going to be paying the most at that millisecond. And there's a lot of sophisticated technology around that. So that's really important to understand. Okay, so where's the traffic split? Now, here's the interesting chart. Here's the direct advertisers down here, and you can see they're only taking about 8% of the traffic. But with the 8% of the traffic, they're making like 30% of the revenue. That's 8% of the traffic, 30% of the revenue. That's pretty good. The rest is going to Google. That's fine. Like I said, we're very mercenary. Okay, so this is the really important chart. Now, I'm sorry, it's a bit sort of messy in many respects, but the blue line is Google. This is the normalized RPM for Google, and we can track it. We can actually track it back to 2007, but I only took it from 2020. And you see the normalized RPM was increasing throughout the pandemic, and now look what's happening with Google. It's all over the place as the market really softened in the online advertising space. The US, there's rumblings of recession and all that sort of stuff. And you can see the last few weeks it's dropped dramatically. Now take a look at the red line, which is direct advertising networks. And you can see they're beginning to counteract the decline in Google. And you can see that just there. Now, that looks all very well and interesting. Let's put them, notice the Google's using the left scale, direct advertising networks using the right scale. That's them on the same scale. They're now both using the right-hand scale so we can see it easier. the direct advertising networks pay a lot more than Google. Yeah, so just really be clear on that. They pay massively more than Google. So if you got all your domains with a single parking provider, you're missing out on this right here. Yeah, so it's something to really consider in your own business and your own investments of where you should put your traffic and things like that. Okay, next thing is this is zoomed in for the 1st of April, and you can see that Google's been trending down right here, and the direct advertising networks are pulling out. All right then. This is the normalized RPM from the base. So in other words, that point 1st of January 2020, what's the normalized RPM doing compared to that point in 2020 is there. And you see, as we saw before, Google sliding back and direct advertising networks increasing. That being said, if we really look at this, so you're comparing Google versus itself and direct advertisers versus themselves, the direct advertisers have increased by about 400% in the normalized RPM, and Google, call it about that line, they increased by 1,000%. And you can see from this chart, it's off a very low base down here, the blue line. That's why they've increased by 1,000%. Okay, so people ask, like, what's one of ParkLogic's core competencies? We're analysts. We live and breathe this data all day, every day, and we have like teams of people just pouring over data all the time, trying to work out how we can actually extract more value from the traffic. So every domain investor needs to be exposed to direct advertising networks. This is the 3 takeaways. The typical Northern Hemisphere summer is back. I think it's a little bit softer than 10 to 15% decline in earnings, but that is swinging around. There's been a large increase in demand for good traffic. And if you think about it, it makes sense, the large increase in demand. And the reason why there's a large increase in demand is really because so many businesses poured online during the pandemic. They couldn't, their shops were useless. People weren't walking past them. They had to go online. Yeah, so I hope you found that interesting. And at any time, by the way, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I'll see if I can see some of them. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. But I'll come back to my presentation shortly again. I've got some more things to share with you guys later on in this session. But anyway, thank you very much for your time. And I'll just stop sharing there. Okay. All right. Well, I hope you found that interesting. Yeah, sorry. Does someone have a question there? Alan, you're muted. Alan, you're muted. Yeah. Yeah, you're still muted. Alan, you're still muted. So I think there's a problem. So if you click on the mute button in the Zoom window, you can ask the question on the far left-hand side. Yes, there we go.
Yeah. Okay. Why do you think the why are they gaining ground, the direct advertisers over Google? What are they doing?
Yeah, well, I think the thing they're doing is they're tapping into, I call it seams of gold. So they'll go along in a particular market vertical, like particularly with travel. For instance, travel is really coming back with a vengeance right now, and so a lot of the decline that happened with COVID was they could no longer monetize travel traffic, but now that's coming back. So the other thing is finance traffic, like loans and things like that. And so the direct advertisers focus on those high value traffic, So rather than getting, dare I say, the scraps off Google's table, why not go along and have the meal and sit yourself at the table? So it's really about that in those market verticals. And to be fair to the direct advertising networks, they're also getting better at what they do. Yeah, and to compete against Google, a lot of people sort of say, well, you can't compete against Google. Oh, yes, you can.
Is that because they're specialized?
In many respects, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in many respects, yes. Yeah, so I think the influx of traffic and the ramping of Google's normalized RPM in the going into the pandemic was largely a result of the small to medium-sized businesses coming online in a great wave and demanding traffic. And they then looked around and said, oh, I need to go along and get traffic. How do I get traffic to my website? And the natural thing is they Googled for it. And Google said, guess what? You can come to us. Yeah, so it's an interesting scenario versus the direct advertising networks. The reason why they went down into COVID is because they lost some of those big market segments like travel and so forth. But more than that, for a average small to medium-sized business to buy traffic from a direct advertising network, they have to have a more sophisticated understanding of what they're doing versus just going to Google. Yeah, and I think that will change over time. And it'll be really quite interesting to see what happens in the coming time. So I hope I answered that question, Alan.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions there? Great. Well, if you have any questions as we go through, feel free to type in little boxes down there, and be great to be able to field those. But in the meantime, I'd like to welcome Jeff Gabriel as a host of this session. Jeff is he's been in the industry for a long time, has been regarded as a fabulous domain broker who has sold millions of dollars worth of domains. And I thought it'd be great to have him on this session to be able to share about like what's his experience working with domain investors and how do you sell more of your domains and get those prices up and all those things. So rather than stealing his thunder, Jeff, I'm going to hand it straight across to you, and welcome to this ParkLogic Fireside Chat. Thanks a lot for that, Jeff.
Oh, Mike, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And thanks everybody for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to what I have to talk about here. And to be totally honest, I've never done a fireside chat like this. And so when I was putting this together, Mike suggested that I do a few slides, and I just thought I'd just start. If I'm going to give you guys some tips, I thought I'd start by talking about some of my experience and as a salesperson and some of the things that have made me successful. Go through a little bit about our business and what we've done, and then I'll leave you guys with some fun facts. So I've been in sales over 20 years. When I was thinking about it, I was actually kind of amazed it's been over 20 years. I started my sales career selling mortgages and loans and any kind of financial real instruments. And at the time when I was in my early 20s, it really gave me the opportunity to ask people a lot of different questions on the phone about their personal lives, about how much money they made, how much money they saved, what their aspirations were for their business. And I did that for about 5 years. And one of the things that I realized is that I worked for a couple of companies during that time, and that a lot of them would do a lot of advertising. And advertising is a great thing, but it doesn't necessarily create a lot of loyalty. And it made the phone ring. And when you answered it, people would ask, what's your interest rate? You'd say it. If your interest rate wasn't competitive or wasn't what they saw advertised by a competitor, just hang up the phone on you. And I really wanted to, instead of just being an order taker, I realized that if I kind of slowed it down a little bit with the person and really got into what their goals were and what they were trying to achieve, and then try to provide them a solution, I really started to create real clients that would come back to me and obviously refer me business. I did that for a number of years, and by chance, I refinanced an entrepreneur's home. He sold one business and was starting a job board, and a job board is where you go and an employer would post jobs for sale, and they let people who are looking for jobs put their resumes on there. The company was called JobFox. It no longer exists. Did someone have a question? Oh, and the funny thing about it was he was telling me, oh, I got another round of venture funding. He was explaining what series he was, and I remember then I didn't even understand what that meant. I had really no clue. but my job was making about 70 to about 100 phone cold calls a day into HR departments and trying to get appointments to go into their office and do a presentation in front of one person, or it could be 20 in a very large organization in the New England, Boston area. I did that for a number of years, and again, going through different questions and trying to understand what the goals were and trying to understand what they're trying to accomplish, and the itch that they had that needed to be scratched went a long way. And a lot of the times it wasn't always about price. And what I learned about wasn't always, again, about interest rate. And so I really learned from those two jobs, which I ended up taking into the domain business, is that sales isn't necessarily about convincing. And I think a lot of people who don't do sales on a regular basis might think that, you know, they picture like Crazy Eddie trying to lie to someone into sales, and I find that intolerable. But it's really about helping and finding solutions. And you know, once I understood what my client is looking to do and what they really want to do, and you can actually find a way to help them, it's a great way to close more opportunities. A lot of the times as a salesperson, those opportunities will come with higher margins, and they also usually come with referrals. If I can add any kind of value to the conversation, if I can enlighten a buyer or a seller with information that helps them make a decision, those are all important things for them to do what they need to do. And I carried a lot of these things that I learned in the mortgage and the HR, selling those services into the domain industry. So with the HR business, I really started to get hitting my stride, and 2009 hit, and I got laid off, even though I think I was number 2 out of almost 200 salespeople there. So so I left that industry, obviously kicking and screaming, and I was like, what the hell am I going to do now? And what I did was I ended up calling companies in Boston that I presented to and went into their HR department, and one of those companies was Cito. Another one, I don't know if you guys know the name of this company, I think you just heard about it in the news, but they just bought Connect.com, it was HubSpot, and another was Zipcar. And these companies were in their infancy, and I really pushed Cito, and I was asking them to give me a chance, and I ended up getting offered positions at all 3 places. And despite Cito offering me a kind of like a waitress's salary that was mainly commission, which wasn't similar to the other 2 jobs, I had faith in my ability as a salesperson. And domains, something about domains really excited me, because talking to different entrepreneurs, talking to sellers from all over the world in an international business, not having to be licensed, not having to deal with all the appraisers and lawyers and different things included with loans, that was the kind of stuff that turned me off from the side of sales. And then with HR, you know, that's kind of like selling to the government, which again came with a lot of bureaucracy. But the good thing I learned with them is understanding how to sell to big companies with the steps of approvals and decision making and things like that. Anyways, I moved on to Cito.com. They gave me a shot, and my first year there I became their top sales rep. The second year, I sold Sex.com for 13 million. And I also sold Poker.org for $1 million. What I like seeing in the news is one of my friends said, how do you feel about you know, your record being broken for Sex.com? And I say, I love it, because that shows to me that the business is growing. And if telling somebody that a top sale occurred 4 years ago, that's not really that relevant anymore, you know. But now we have many different sales that are above the value or what Sex.com sold for. I don't know about Poker.org. I think that one was, you know, quite a sale, and I was excited about that. But again, the same month that I sold Sex.com, I sold the domain for $1,500. So the idea as a salesperson is you just keep kind of pushing. In 2011, I left Cito and founded Igloo.com at the very end of 2011. I've always had that entrepreneurial kind of itch, and I founded that with a colleague of mine, Tessa Holcomb. We worked on that for a couple of years together. And one of my clients there was Frank Schilling, who's the founder of, as many of you guys know, Uniregistry. And him and I had a great relationship. And he said, you know, Jeff, I love working with you. I think you're great. But what I want to do is I really want to start increasing the volume of my own personal sales. And I want to build a big brokerage down in the Cayman Islands, and I want you to do it. And I wasn't really prepared for that, but I was in my early 30s at the time, and I said to my wife, when the hell are we ever going to get an opportunity like this? He said, I have developers, I got money, you know, let's build this thing together. And we did it. And I left Igloo with a heavy heart. I was happy about it, but there was no way I could say no to this. So I went down there. There was 4 of us on the sales team. When I left, there was over 50. That includes some people in customer service, some support people, but mainly it was a lot of brokers. We had quite a few in Cayman. We had an office in England at the end of it, and then we had some people that worked from home. And as a team, while I was there for the 7 years that I worked at Uniregistry, in my tenure, we sold over $450 million in domain sales, which I'm very proud of. And in my final full year there, I know Cito likes to put out their total sales for the year, but I made a goal for us as a team to beat Cito as in yearly sales. And in 2018, we did it. And I was really proud of the team that we were able to do that, and excited about it. In 2020, Cito sold to GoDaddy. I saw the sale before it happened on the horizon, having, you know, an intimate relationship with Frank and the team, and what the goals were with the management team as well. And I still kind of had that entrepreneurial itch that I never really fully itched with Igloo, because I left so soon, and I felt like, you know, it's time for me to go and give this a shot. I remember standing in the kitchen, and I said to my wife, you know, a lot of people would kill to have a well-paying job in an industry and a job that they love on a beautiful Caribbean island. But, you know, I still also have a dream of building my own thing. And if it sells, I didn't know it was actually going to sell to GoDaddy at the time, but I had a feeling I knew, you know, a couple of the places that it would go to. But I still had a dream. And I said we could end up, you know, sleeping on my mother's couch, eating out of a can of beans. But, you know, and she said, I support you. And my family did too. And we gave it a shot. So I resigned from Uniregistry, which was some of the best years of my life, living down there and building that business. And I co-founded Saw.com with a good friend of mine and colleague, Amanda Waltz, who has quite a bit of industry experience as well. Kind of going off the subject a little bit, we founded Saw.com in December of 2019. Mike has mentioned the pandemic a few times. I moved back from Cayman in like September, and we founded Saw.com middle of December. I hired a couple of brokers. We started getting going in, you know, really like January. Pipeline was starting to build. I was really worried, like our seller's going to give us a chance. Will buyers work with us? You know, my buddy, who's the godfather of one of my children, he's a developer. He built our website. You know, we just kind of just throwing this together to get things to work. And the pipeline was building in January. February, we started to make some decent sales. March, we're shucking and jiving and rocking and rolling. And then all of a sudden, mid-March, I don't remember the exact day, but I remember watching TV when they canceled the NCAA, which is a huge basketball tournament. And they started canceling all these different things in the United States. And it's just like we hit a wall. And our pipeline vanished. And then in April, it didn't come back. In May, it looked like the same thing. Our business was really like floundering. And I know the people that joined us were worried, and I was scared too. And I remember saying, I go, look, you know, we have a lot of people here are afraid. I'm afraid too. I'm afraid to even go to the grocery store and buy things. I was like putting on a hoodie with 2 masks on and goggles on, for Christ's sake, and taking a shower when I got home. I was so scared of everything. And I just said, look, we got to work and put our heads down, and at the very least use this as an escape to get away from the craziness that's going on in this world. And when these companies or these buyers start buying again, we're going to be first in line. And that's what we did. We all worked our asses off. And by the end of June, it was like someone kind of like hit a switch, and business really started to take off. And so in the 2.5 years that we've been founded, here's a few of the names. This obviously isn't all the names. I try to pick out a kind of a cool little group of names to show you some ones that are exciting, and they all have their own stories. I mean, we recently sold Comet and Cool.com and Bunny.com, but we sold Event. Ollie was a really cool and exciting sale we were part of. That one, the company said we're not selling multiple times, but eventually they said yes. And we had some fun selling some of these GTLDs, which I'll get into in a few minutes. But it's been, a really great experience. It certainly has given me a fair share of white hairs. So if you guys haven't seen me in a couple years, you're definitely going to see some serious whites on the sides. I think I'm starting to look like Paulie from the Sopranos. But now we've grown to 7 full-time. That's all we do is sell domains, salespeople. I have 4 people that, we write business development executives, but they do a lot of lead generation, research, things like that. I have 3 people on our development team, 2 developers and a project manager, and then we have 1 person who does some writing for us. And the things that we focus on, we're a domain brokerage. I'll just get into it really quick for you guys, and the way that we kind of look at things as a business and the things that we cover is one of the things that might make us a little different than our competitors is we offer portfolio representation. When I say that is, yes, we have sellers that point their domains at our for sale landers, but we go further than that. We offer consulting as to, an inquiry comes in, we might say, you might want to price it at this, it might be a good idea, look at the market, you might want to sell it here, I think you should go higher. We have conversations with sellers. I even have some sellers that have us log into their CETO and Afternic accounts and really just handle everything for them. And I make suggestions as to what pricing should be, and they agree or disagree. So there's those that want to be kind of hands off, and we help them a lot. And then we have other sellers that handle every step and they want to be, involved, and that's okay too. When it comes to our outbound sales, which, I have a lot of domainers that come to us and other people that just own great domains and say, hey, can you sell this for us? One of the things that we do for a lot of the people that work with us from a portfolio representation standpoint, where we do more of our outbound sales and really the one-offs like an AI.com, is an inquiry comes into our company. It could be a cool sounding name. We Google it and you see that there's 10 other companies named it. The buyer is saying, I'll give you $2,000. We say that's worth a hell of a lot more than that. And then we start calling those other companies and it turns into, it can turn into a sale pretty fast. We offer a lot of buyer brokerage. We have a lot of companies. We've found our way into the VC world. I'm going to get into that a little bit and how they think, and a lot of startups and entrepreneurs. And it's actually a lot of fun working with them sometimes it's not. But one of the things that we like to do is, someone might come to us and say, send us all your oneword.coms. We're not going to do that. We're going to have a conversation, a Zoom call, face-to-face. We're going to go over their budget, what their plans are, what the product is, and really, talk about what would be the perfect domain if money didn't matter, and really talk about what the prices would be for domains and what kind of quality they can get, really explain all of it to them, try to plant the seed with ideas of using, an appraisal service like escrow.com. So if they have objections to it in the beginning, you can work those out and really try to help them and educate them, provide them with neutral information. And then one of the other things I did when the pandemic kind of hit, and I was actually always interested in it and was part of it at Uniregistry as well, is TLD consulting. So I've done some consulting for MMX. I helped them reorganize some of their tiers. I picked a bunch of premiums, brought them to market. I helped out INC with their sales team, and I've helped, I've done some help with .link as well. And recently we launched just a very basic automated appraisal tool. It wasn't built to appraise the portfolios of domainers. What you might notice on there is that you can get a appraisal certificate And one of the things that we do is we can quickly give a buyer one of those certificates when we have those calls and let them see that, so they have something tangible and they can understand why they might need to go and have that hard conversation with their investors, have that conversation with people that are above them to make a decision to either get more money or find something else. And so this is really the last slide of the presentation, and I'm going to just give you guys some fun facts that we've learned along the way. And then I can talk about, if I was in your shoes, some of the things that I might do as a salesperson. Like some domainers I talk to, have a really good friend that lives in Orlando, and he has a sizable portfolio. I'd probably say it's 9,000, 8,000 names. And I said, why don't you give us a crack at it? And he's like, Jeff, if I didn't work on the purchase inquiries every day, I wouldn't have anything to do. He's like, I only golf so many times a day. I'm like, okay, a week. So I'm like, okay, he likes to do it, but he sends us some inquiries that he wants us to work on here and there. But if you want to do it, we can, I'll get into some details about that. But with us, a lot of the times when people inquire with us from the start to the finish, the average sales cycle from when the money is paid it takes about 60 days. With a buyer, when they come to us, whether it's from a sales lander or a buyer broker opportunity that comes to us, you'd be surprised, but time frame can be just as important as price. One of the things that you got to keep in mind is, and I learned this at Uniregistry, is you got to get back to these people quickly, because there are people that left this to the very end, buying the domain. They're qualified, they have the money, but they got to figure out something. There's a conference they're going to, there's something they sponsored, there's a release of the product, there's something. Sometimes they just say hell with it and they go out with their release, whatever it is, and use an inferior domain, which obviously gives you a leg up. But a lot of the times they just will find something else. And so that kind of gets me to my third point of things that I've learned along the way is, even if the news isn't good for someone who's inquiring, and now I'm not saying that automated email you get offering you $10,000 on your .com and they're going to look at other things or whatever it says, and then 4 minutes later you get it on another name, that you should be responsive to that. But when a qualified buyer from a legitimate business or a legitimate broker from a legitimate domain brokerage that writes, good coherent sentences, has legitimate content on their website, comes to you, even if the offer isn't something that you're looking for, responding will not weaken your position in the negotiation. It actually will probably help. And bad news is fine. But when there's just no response, and that's taken as a position to always get a higher offer, a lot of the times that's met by the buyer, especially these companies where they need to make a decision with, let's go find something else. And that leads me to my next point here is, I'd say about a third of the buyers that hire us for domain brokerage to acquire a domain name for them do not end up with the domain they initially wanted us to get for them. They end up with, we call it internally, we call it a plan B, meaning we'll find something else. It might be another extension, or it will be something totally different. And now it could be someone coming to us that has really good taste and doesn't have a huge budget, and so we need to educate them on the value. Or we have a seller that just won't respond no matter what, or you have someone that is just, it just doesn't work, and so we need to find them something else. And so that can happen. Another thing that we are recognizing here is GTLD and CCTLD sales. And this is internally, this isn't in the industry, but at our company, and we've been in business for 2.5 years, have risen year over year between 35 and 50%. And this year we've already sold more GTLDs and CCTLDs than we did last year. So by the end of this year, it potentially is going to be more than this number that I've told you. And when I put the asterisk next to CCTLDs, there are obviously some very specific ones that people like IO, AI. .co isn't as popular as it used to be, but it still is. But GTLDs are definitely getting more and more popular. And the other thing that I'm finding is is a lot of these companies that don't sell to the public are not married to the .com. So they come to us, they say, we want to get this name, this, there's a for sale page on it, it's a dead page, whatever it is. We say, oh, that's going to be $1 million name. They're just like, forget it, let's get something else, or they're just not going to buy anything. They're very quick to just say, we'll just do something else, because they feel like they don't necessarily have to have it to achieve the goals of the business, and they feel that other extensions can take it for them, and they're not really that bothered by it. One of the things I've also noticed at our company, .net is dead. We don't get buyers who want to buy them. Our sellers that own the names, we have sold a handful of .nets this year. We've sold a few hundred domains so far this year, and .net is not one that I see on our sales lists very often. We have sellers that own a lot of .nets, and they're just not performing compared to some of these other extensions like I would expect. And when we talk to some of these younger folks, it's funny, like I've had a couple Web3 people who say, we want the .io and we want the .com. And I say, well, what about the .net? It's for sale at, buy domains for $3 grand. They're just like, forget it. And they'll say, if we can't get the IO, we don't want the .com. And my last bit, and I think I'm aging myself now that I'm in my 40s, but I'm starting to have conversations with CEOs who are in their early 30s, late 20s, especially in the Web3 space, that have obscene amounts of funding behind them. And you would think that seeing that their funding is in maybe 50 million, 100 million, whatever it is, or they share that with you, when you tell them that, the .com is going to cost a significant amount of money, they have no problem saying, let's just get something else. Like they'll immediately say, what about the IO? Like without hesitation. What about, XYZ starting to creep into that conversation more, but I see more IO. If it's artificial intelligence, it's AI. Like they don't really discuss com as much anymore. It's really, that's like really like to be. That's not all. Like everything I'm telling you about buyers and situations that we're learning about aren't guaranteed rules, but this is just, the information that as generality in this data here is what, we're seeing as a team, and I've heard with my own ears. And then really moving on as, a domainer, and if you want to handle your own sales, I'm going to leave you with this. Okay. Number one, if you're using Excel, stop. You shouldn't use that, or Outlook or Apple Mail as your CRM to collect leads and to keep up with everything. If you're going to be working on sales that are going to make you thousands of dollars or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars over the course of a year in sales, then I highly suggest you get a really basic CRM, set up the fields the way you like it, and find a solution that feeds those inquiries in there, and you save your data if you can. If it's just a handful of like, who is emails that come in here and there, again, I would probably try to save the information, try to keep track of it where you can have like it's like a unique email, and then you can map the way that people email in, and you can put that information in there, and you can store that info. So you can remember what you quote prices on, you can remember who's inquiring on names, how often they're inquired on, what you said to people. So that's really important. The data is really valuable, is number one. I'm sure Mike offers like some sort of API or data that you could potentially even pipe in your traffic and revenue information, or some way to kind of make it so you can look at that. And then don't be afraid to follow up with people, even if, again, thinking that it might weaken your position as a seller. You don't have to say things to them like, I have another buyer, when you don't. What you can say things like, are you still interested here? I'd like to close the file if you aren't, or any thoughts on this? Haven't heard back, where are we? Things like that, again, don't hurt your position. I find that some of these people that will inquire with you are inquiring on 50 other names, and they have a list. And sometimes like the squeaky wheel is the one who's going to get the attention, and they might make you that offer and say, oh yeah, there you are, or whatever, we'll get back to you, or however it is. Don't be afraid to say hi. And you know, I know not everybody on this call wants to call buyers or sellers if you're looking to buy names yourself, but having that conversation with someone might be a little awkward, but at the same time, you might find out that the person on the other end of the phone has a lot of things in common with you. And if you just take that 5 or 10 minutes to have that conversation with them, it can go a long way. Even if you, again, are delivering bad news. But I always find I learn something new. It's something that I end up talking to a different business person, like Bill was just talking about his coffee business. I mean, if I called him about a random domain that he owns, I mean, talking about coffee, talking about roasting it, talking about shipping it, margins, I find that really interesting. And that's why I love the business. And so having those conversations will then unearth or uncover what that person might be looking to do. And then you really start having more of that frank conversation about what he would pay and what you would sell it for. And potentially you could just come to an agreement with that.
Yeah.
So those are really the basics of sales that I could help you with. And you know, I think I talked a little longer than I probably should have, but again, I'd like to thank everybody and then open up the this to any conversation or questions or anything like that.
Fantastic. Jeff, you provide a whole lot of great information. You can stop sharing your screen if you like there. And there's,
Sure.
There's his email address. And for those of you who have been listening, if you have questions, feel free to type them in the box just there in the chat box, and I can pass them on to Jeff. But I just have a couple of questions while people sort of think about that. The first thing is, are you seeing a rise in demand right now for the quality domains, or is it sort of plateaued a bit still?
A rise in demand for quality domains. What I find is when I entered the industry, you know, 10, 12 years ago, it seemed that descriptive domains were more in demand than anything. And it seems to me that a lot of the companies that want to pay a lot more money than the higher end are looking for the cooler, brandable style domains. That would be what I'm seeing. And there's always demand in action words that have a positive connotation. It hasn't stopped. We've had some people, for example, one of our clients owns party.com. I got to tell you, I cannot tell you how many $1 million offers that domain has received over the years. And it doesn't stop. You know, that name is, but they want, you know, connect.com money for it. And potentially, eventually they might get it. And those are the names that I'm not really seeing plateau, but I have to be honest, in May and June were not great months for us as a business. July, surprisingly, is a little bit on the slower side, but it definitely picked up in the second half, and this August looks really good for us. But in May and June, I was a little worried. It wasn't like crickets and we didn't have anything going on, but you know, it wasn't like it's been over the last 2 years, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that up. It's like we saw the same thing as you saw from my stats. It's really slowed down this year into the summer, but it's picking up rapidly at the moment. And so we're looking forward to that. Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up the fact of putting monetization stats also with a domain, and that's really important. The ParkLogic API is the most extensive API, I think, in the industry. In fact, we built our entire interface using our own API. So you can pull whatever data you like from it, which is great. The other thing I should mention is that the top of every single page lander that the domain may go to, you can actually change the message you're putting on per portfolio inside ParkLogic. So you can have a different message and do A/B testing. You can just create new portfolios, change the message you want, put it up there, and see which one works best. Yeah. Do you find that message at the top of, say, a traditional part page saying this domain is for sale is important? Like, should you put your phone number and things like that there, for instance?
I like to have, my opinion is we put our phone number on the landing page itself.
Yeah.
What we find is that by putting it on the Park page, is people will immediately just call, and if you miss the call, a lot of people just hang up. And then you don't know necessarily what name they're inquiring about, where they're from, what's going on. And then you also have the possibility of getting a lot more confused people calling you. And so what ends up happening is you get tired of answering the phone because a lot of people are looking for shoes or something else or another service. So when you put the sales landing page and you tell them the domain is for sale and you have some bullets, it will filter that out. And if your phone number is there, a lot of the times they make the inquiry and then they call. So you get the data, and when they call in, you get to keep the data. If you miss the call, then you know what they're inquiring about, and they usually write you like some sort of a message or whatever. And then our phone system also allows people to text us, which, you know, the texts come in as well. And some people just don't want to talk on the phone. Some people don't want to email or whatever. But my friend Kevin asked a question: what certain CRM do I recommend? And the CRM that I would recommend to somebody that is kind of like a one-man show or whatever would be close.com. And the reason why I like Close is versus say Salesforce and some of these others is it's totally customizable. The customer service there is really good. At Salesforce, a lot of the times when you ask for customizations or connecting an API, you have to pay a contractor of theirs to help you do it, which can get really expensive. At Close, you can connect on this program called Zapier. So you can create Zaps to do different automations for your business, and it connects right into the CRM. So you can do a lot of different things. And even if you're not a developer. So like when I got my business started, I was making Zaps and putting things together to make different data appear and do certain automated tasks for myself. When I didn't have, you know, the money to pay for a development team or somebody like that. So I would look at close.com, and if you want it, I can give you a couple of helpful hints on how to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. We actually use Salesforce only because we have a team of developers who can develop in Salesforce. Yeah, but I agree with you. One of the things that we're constantly looking at doing, even inside Salesforce, is how do you strip out all the stuff that you really don't need? And how do you focus on what's really important to create, say, the sale or reach out to a client or help account management and that sort of stuff? And because you end up having your team spending all their time filling in forms on a website rather than actually doing any of the calls you're talking about.
Absolutely. So like for us, somebody makes an inquiry, you know, their data goes into the CRM. We capture their IP address. We know where they're located. We know what time it is where they are. We know the domain they inquired on. We know how many times that domain's been inquired on. You know, we know all kinds of who the seller is. We know all kinds of data that's all put right in the lead for the broker. And then in Close, you can actually pay them for a phone number, and you just click the call button and it calls them. And you can text them through the CRM too. So it's a really good, you know, little CRM, and it's reasonably priced for a small business. I think like a company, say like GoDaddy, Close isn't going to work for them. It's just, you got to go to like Salesforce or one of those places. But for a small business, I think it's a good thing. It has its limitations and it has its quirks. They all do. You know, but without spending $100,000 on your own or more, and it's still not right. You know, you gotta kind of work with what you work with. Every salesperson I've ever met, when you say the word Salesforce to them, they say back, "I fucking hate Salesforce." That is the answer back, every one of them. And it's just, I use Salesforce when I sold the HR solutions, and I used it when I worked at Cito, and I didn't like it at either place. You know, and but Close, I don't curse its name. You know, it does a good job.
Yeah, it can be quite complex, that's for sure. So here's the question for you then, that there's a whole lot of domain investors here in this room.
Sure.
What's the best way they can work with a broker? Because one of my experiences being, and no one in this room could possibly be like this, is that I have this saying that quite often domain investors try to sell burger domains at caviar prices.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's this unrealistic expectation that this domain that should be sold for like $500, they're trying to get $50,000 for it. And so then what they do is they give it to a broker like yourself, say, "Hey, I want you to go sell this domain." You look at it and you say, You know, I can sell this maybe for $1,000. And they say, yeah, but I'm only willing to accept $50,000 for it or more.
Okay.
How do you deal with that? Or you
On
just
an
don't
outbound
accept those
standpoint-
domains?
Well, I mean, so what I was saying prior, like on an outbound standpoint, and when we have a seller that works with us and has a group of names that, you know, it's usually a certain quality of names and a certain size of a portfolio. We get an inquiry, you search it, you see companies, and we say, look, you know, your prices, a lot of them are reasonable, you know, so we want to work with them on a regular basis. I mean, if you have a seller that everything's $1 million and they don't accept anything and we're doing all kinds of work, eventually it just becomes, you know, this isn't going to work for us, and that's their strategy and that's the way they run their business. But like, you know, I think the thing is that no matter what you sell, it doesn't matter if I sell domains or I sell bags of manure or I sell parking or whatever it is. A salesperson has to have confidence in whatever it is that they can sell it, and it's in whatever that is. And if that salesperson believes that they could sell that name for 50,000, maybe they can do it. Maybe they can call someone with such conviction that they can convince them in a way or educate them in a way that they believe that it's worth that and they pay it. I mean, some names I see come up on Ron Jackson's list, I might not even hand registered if they were available, and they sell for good money, right? But a broker needs to make sales in order to pay the bills and make a living. And, you know, for you to create the expectation as a broker that you're going to, if you think about it, you give me a bad name for me to take to market, I have to use the 4 business development people to research companies that might want to buy it, to find the people, find the email addresses, find phone numbers, then put a campaign together, put it into the CRM, you know, write some content, potentially pay $500 or $600 for a press release that it's available for sale, and then start following up and calling, and then getting meetings, and then talking to them and trying to push that through the steps of an organization for them to make a decision. It's a big task, and the price has to make sense. So on an outbound standpoint, I'm going to say no thanks. On a buyer broker standpoint, I'm going to tell them that the seller's expectations are above the market, and if you want the domain, then, you know, you're going to have to pay. Hopefully we can negotiate them down. Or we say, you know, he's got, you know, stars in his eyes, and we get to find you something else, which goes back to my point about plan B. But there are situations where the buyers are like, pay it. It doesn't matter. We want it. And they pay it. So, you know, with working with Frank, it was funny. Like, sometimes we'd price a name at 30 grand. And then the buyer would offer 3. And I'd talk to him and I'd say, you've owned this domain for 16 years. This is the only person who's ever offered money on it. And he'd be like, okay, sell it. So then we quote 30, sell it for 3. You know, I think the thing is that the conversations that I have with these sellers is that are my customers is I can be frank with them. But in the end, no pun intended with my conversations with Frank Schilling, but in the end, it's their toys, their assets, and, you know, and they need to make that decision. And I try to give each of them enough information so they can make an honest decision and be happy with it. Because to me, if I worked with you every day selling your names, Mike, and I come to you and I say, look, you got $5 grand on this, it's a $500 name, and you're like, nope, can't sell it for less than 10. I just don't want to do it. Like, I don't get mad. I say, that's fine. You know, and we move on. I say, okay, well, I'll tell the buyer it's 10 or nothing. Like, that's it. I think you're swinging for the fences here, and you can lose them. And if the buyer vanishes, you know, he's gone. But we're hopefully going to have other opportunities in the next coming weeks, you know. But as a broker, I get people on LinkedIn that come to me with a lot of bad names, and they want you to go out and say, I want $1 million for this, I want 5 for that. It's like, yeah, well, so do I, you know, but that's just sorry.
As I quite often say, is that some people, they view a domain as like a lottery ticket. You got to buy a domain to be able to be in the lottery. And then what you do is you look at it and say, how do I double my chances of winning the lottery? You buy 2 of them. How do you triple? You buy 3, and then you get 100 domains, and then they go along and they value it $10,000 for every domain, and they could be complete junk. And they now say, I'm a millionaire. Yeah, and they go, I'm a millionaire. Here I am. I'm a millionaire. They haven't sold anything yet.
Yeah.
But they're now a millionaire in their own mind. and I think it's one of the interesting things about this industry, is there was a number I ended up crunching out. This is at the last physical NamesCon, and it was quite a shocking number and in many respects, but it was 0.42. You say, what's that number? 0.42% stock turn. That's the average for the industry. Now we may sort of say, is it 0.42 or 1% or is it? It's a low number. So when you look at your own portfolio and you sort of think, I'm selling more than 0.42% of my portfolio, you're selling too cheap. You got to look at number of inquiries and that sort of stuff as well, and for each of the domains, take that into account. On the other hand, if you're getting no inquiries and you're selling less than, or very few inquiries, you're selling less than 0.42% of your portfolio per year, then you probably got junk domains. The issue is, are you willing to keep on funding it?
Yeah, well, there's that too. There's those people too. But I think, we're talking at a company that monetizes traffic, and there's a portion of everyone's portfolio that isn't really for selling, right? It's just not for brokerage. And there's domains that some of my customers have that we don't want our for sale links on. That's for making revenue. That's not for selling, because everyone who inquires on the name is confused. They're looking for something else. So you take those out, and then you look at, but name generic good names that should be sold. Yeah, you should be selling a certain amount of those and getting a certain number of inquiries. But, it's hard to tell when there's so many confused people.
But anyway, can I say, Jeff, it's been great hearing from you, and really appreciate your time. It's been absolutely fabulous, in fact. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here and hearing your experience over the years. And I'm sure that anyone who's going to NamesCon, you'll be going to NamesCon, is that right?
Yeah, we'll be there. Myself, Mark, and Amanda. So come up and say hello. Love to meet everyone who's on this call, and thank you personally for listening.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, let me just share my screen very, very briefly once again. And speaking of NamesCon, have I got the right screen? Does that look good? Do you see that?
I do, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so NamesCon, just about NamesCon, we're going to be there. We're actually a platinum sponsor. That's our booth. If you remember, if you were there last time, there's the hotel bar, which is around the corner from the reception desk right here. And that's our booth. And there's something else we're doing at NamesCon is we're running a series of master classes. There's the keynote hall. There's the breakout room. I'm actually doing a keynote session the very first day at 11 o'clock as well. But on day 2 of the conference, we're running a session on the state of monetization. I'll be looking at some really hardcore numbers and what's going on with monetization and what do we see typically in portfolios and so forth. We're looking at advanced monetization. These classes are really aimed at people who monetize traffic. If you monetize traffic, or you got a chunk of your portfolio you monetize traffic with, then these are for. And the future of monetization is what's beyond PPC, and we'll be taking a look at that as well. And some of the things that we'll be revealing of what we've been working on the future of monetization, how it is. We see that it's about to go through a transformation. The good old Park page. There's going to be millions of dollars over the years. I think it's going to change substantially, put that way. Okay, so there's a sneak preview of a few of our banners we're having at the conference. One on monetization on Apogee, and you'll be hearing a lot about the investor's dashboard of how you can pull data in from any source and display it on the screen, all that sort of stuff. Inside of ParkLogic, not just our data, any data, including if you're buying into crypto or something like that, you can pull that data in as well. And also about the Elite Traffic Masterclass. Yeah, so, but anyway, that's some of the things we're doing at NamesCon, and really look forward to seeing you guys there. And if you're going to be at NamesCon, just put it in the chat. I'll be at NamesCon. That would be really good, because we'd love to be able to catch up with you. So if you're sitting there going, what should I do now? Click on the chat button, type, I will be at NamesCon. And that would be great. and really look forward to seeing all of you guys there. And please don't be strangers. But next month we have a very special guest. And next month's special guest is going to be the former CEO of .club, Colin Campbell, and he's going to be taking us through the journey of what was it like to run a registry. And it's going to be really interesting, and just to hearing his story right from the whole pre-work they're doing, applying for the extension, so forth like that, right through to the final sale. Now, there's something that the final sale of .club to GoDaddy. Now, obviously, something he's not going to be able to share, but I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion with Colin. I really look forward to hearing from him. So it'll be there. We'll be announcing that, and I'll send some emails out, obviously, about that. But typically, it's the second Tuesday in the month. Now, one of the interesting things is that I'll be doing it not from Melbourne, Australia, but I'll be in the US. So I won't have to get up really early or anything like that. I'm going to be having it at 6 p.m. on Eastern time. I'll be spending a lot of time actually in Fort Lauderdale and all over the United States. I'll be doing lots of travel, and I'm going to do something I think quite novel, and that is my goal is to go and visit potential clients and say hi to them. I don't know any other monetization companies try to do this, and you've got an Australian who is going to be flying to the US and also Europe, by the way, and just trying to see as many people as possible. So I'd love to see you. Go along and put a note in the chat if you wherever you're from or anything like that, and I'll see if I could organize my schedule. I would love to catch up and talk about domains, because I had an interesting question just the other day. Someone said to me, "Why are you still doing this?" And I said to them, "You know what? I just love domains. I really do. Like you look at domains, and domains are dream enablers. Every time you sell a domain, every time Jeff sells a domain, it's not just a bunch of bits and bytes and all that sort of stuff. He's selling and enabling someone to dream. They're going to use that domain for their business and that sort of stuff. And it's just phenomenal. We're enabling dreams. And if you really think about that, we're actually enabling the future of humanity. If you take to the next stage, because the future of humanity is largely online. The future of commerce is online. And we're enabling that. You and we're enabling that. That's number one. Number two is when I look at domain traffic, I'm not just looking at traffic, I'm looking at real people doing real things. What depends upon that? Everything. Everything depends on that. So when you're sitting and you're looking at your domains, think of them as dream enablers, and you're getting a snapshot of humanity. And that's amazing. That's why I keep on doing this business. I love it. And I love meeting people like you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And I'm just going to hang around here for a while. If you have questions, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. And I'm not sure, Jeff, you're able to hang around a little while too. Then it'd be great to go along and answer any questions that people have. But we're just going to close things off right now. And I look forward to seeing you next time. But like I said, feel free to hang around as well, and I'll stop recording right now.